Other notable songs on the album included the tender piano ballads Jealous Guy and Oh My Love. Around the time of Imagine's release, John and Yoko moved to New York City permanently. So, what did the Beatles do after the Beatles? So much. They made a lot of music, they got married, they got divorced, they got remarried, they made money, they lost money. So, in today's video, we'll talk about what John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison and Ringo Starr got up to after the Beatles breakup. Hello, by the way, and welcome to my Beatles YouTube channel. If you like the Beatles, please make sure you subscribe and you check out my other videos because you're definitely gonna find them interesting. So, let's go! After the Beatles disbanded in 1970, John Lennon embarked on a solo career that was marked by both musical innovation and personal turbulence. His first major project was the formation of the Plastic Ono Band with his wife Yoko Ono. In December 1970, Lennon released the album John Lennon Plastic Ono Band, a deeply personal work influenced by his primal therapy sessions. The album was raw and intense, reflecting Lennon's struggles and inner pain. In 1971, John recorded the Imagine album at his home studio in Tittenhurst Park, with additional recording at Record Plant in New York City. Lennon often described Imagine as a more accessible version of Plastic Ono Band. The album, released in the fall of 1971, quickly topped the charts in both the US and UK. The title track, Imagine, became Lennon's signature solo song, with its hopeful lyrics and soothing melody. Other notable songs on the album included the tender piano ballads Jealous Guy and Oh My Love, as well as How Do You Sleep, a catching attack on Paul McCartney, featuring George Harrison's biting slide guitar. Around the time of Imagine's release, John and Yoko moved to New York City permanently, where John was captivated by the city's energy and vibrant political scene. As 1971 ended, John and Yoko released the holiday single Happy Christmas, War Is Over in the US, with the UK release delayed due to publishing issues. In early 1972, Lennon's visa expired, leading to deportation proceedings that Lennon believed were politically motivated due to his anti-war activism. In June 1972, John and Yoko released Sometime in New York City, a double album that was a commercial and critical failure. By April 1973, they had moved to the Dakota Building on Central Park West. The Dakota, an iconic luxurious New York residence, became their new home. However, less than 6 months later, John and Yoko began a trial separation. John moved to Los Angeles accompanied by his new girlfriend May Pang, the couple's personal assistant. Ironically, it was Yoko who suggested they should get together. This period, which Lennon later called his lost weekend, lasted 18 months and involved heavy drinking and partying with friends like Ringo Starr, Harry Nilsson and Keith Moon. Despite the chaos, Lennon released Mind Games in November 1973, an album that marked a partial return to the style of Imagine. At this time, John was being sued by Maurice Levy over copyright infringement of one line in his Beatles song Come Together. As part of an agreement, Lennon had to record 3 Levy-owned songs, so he decided to record a whole album of rock and roll covers. The album was simply called Rock and Roll. Sadly, both John Lennon and producer Phil Spector were not in the best of shape during this period, so the sessions rapidly disintegrated into drunken, out-of-tune chaos. The project would not be completed until 1975. In 1974, Lennon returned to New York with May Pang and began working on Walls and Bridges, which was released in September and became a #1 hit. John's last concert appearance was with Elton John at the Madison Square Garden on the 28th of November 1974. Yoko Ono's surprise visit backstage led to their reconciliation in early 1975. And later that year, Yoko gave birth to their son Sean on John's 35th birthday. John then took a 5-year break to be a house husband and dedicate his time to Sean. In 1980, Lennon returned to music with Double Fantasy, an album reflecting his contented family life. Songs like Watching the Wheels and Beautiful Boy celebrated his newfound peace, while Woman and Just Like Starting Over became timeless anthems. Tragically, on the evening of the 8th of December 1980, John was shot and killed outside the Dakota building by a fan driven by envy and a distorted sense of purpose inspired by J.D. Salinger's novel The Catcher in the Rye. John Lennon's sudden death at age 40 shook the world and marked the end of an era for one of music's most influential figures. After the breakup of the Beatles in 1970, George Harrison pursued a solo career. He immediately assembled a studio band consisting of ex-Beatle Ringo Starr, guitar legend Eric Clapton, keyboardist Billy Preston, and others to record all the songs that had never made it into the Beatles' catalogue. The result was a 3-disc album, All Things Must Pass. The album was a commercial and critical success. Not long after the album's release, Harrison combined his charitable work and his continued passion for the East when he put together a series of groundbreaking benefit concerts at New York City's Madison Square Garden to raise money for refugees in Bangladesh. Known as the Concert for Bangladesh, the shows, which featured Bob Dylan, Leon Russell, and Ravi Shankar, would go on to raise about $15 million for UNICEF. The concert produced a Grammy-winning album and a successful documentary film, and it also laid the groundwork for future benefit shows like Live Aid and Farm Aid. During a trip to India, George Harrison decided to abandon the study of the sitar after realizing the profound skill of many local musicians. Despite his dedication, he saw that their expertise far surpassed his own, and even Ravi Shankar, his sitar teacher, mentioned that only one of them would eventually become a good player. This experience led Harrison to set aside the sitar, but his connection to India remained strong. Meditation and Hinduism, which he had embraced during his sitar studies, continued to be significant in his life. Not everything about post-Beatle life went smoothly for George. In 1974, his marriage to Pattie Boyd, whom he'd married 8 years before, ended when she left him for George's close friend Eric Clapton. George also had an affair with Ringo Starr's wife Maureen. Harrison's studio work struggled too, from 1973 to 1977, starting with Living in the Material World, Extra Texture, and 33 1/3, all of which failed to meet sales expectations. Following the release from that last album, Harrison took a short break from music. He wound down his own record label, Dark Horse Records, which he had started in 1974 and had released albums by a number of other bands. He also started his own film production company called Handmade Films. The company produced the successful Monty Python film Life of Brian in 1979, and would go on to make 26 other films before Harrison sold his interest in the company in 1994. On the 2nd of September 1978, George married Olivia Trinidad Arias, almost a month after the birth of their only child, Danny Harrison. George found immense joy in dedicating his time to working on the expansive gardens of his mansion, Friar Park. Gardening became a passion and a form of meditation for him, allowing a peaceful escape from the pressures of fame and the music industry. He spent countless hours meticulously planning and cultivating the gardens, transforming Friar Park into a botanical wonderland. In 1979, he returned to the studio to release his self-titled album. It was followed 2 years later by Somewhere in England, which was still being worked on at the time of John Lennon's assassination on the 8th of December 1980. The record eventually included the Lennon tribute track All Those Years Ago, a song that reunited ex-Beatles Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr, along with ex-Wings members Denny Laine and Linda McCartney. While the song was a hit, the album, its predecessor and its successor weren't. For George, the lack of commercial appeal and the constant battles with music executives proved draining, and prompted another break from the studio. A comeback of sorts came in November 1987 with the release of Cloud 9. The album turned out several top-charting hits, including Got My Mind Set on You and When We Was Fab, a song that reflected on the life of Beatlemania with Ringo Starr and Paul McCartney, who was dressed up as a walrus appearing in the music video in February 1988. Later that year, Harrison formed the Traveling Wilburys. The group consisted of Harrison, Jeff Lynne, Roy Orbison, Tom Petty and Bob Dylan, and they released 2 successful albums. Inspired by the group's commercial success, George took to the road with his new bandmates in 1992, embarking on his first international tour in 18 years. In 1997, George, a long-time smoker, was successfully treated for throat cancer. 18 months later, his life was again put on the line when a crazy 33-year-old Beatles fan managed to break into Friar Park, attacking the musician and his wife Olivia with a knife. Olivia hit the man in the head with a heavy lamp, and the police arrived pretty quickly and arrested him. George was stabbed 40 times, but thankfully he managed to survive. Olivia suffered several cuts and bruises. In May 2001, George's cancer returned. There was lung surgery, but the doctors soon discovered that the cancer had spread to the brain. He relocated to Switzerland for treatment, and after that treatment didn't work, he traveled to the US and was eventually hospitalized at the UCLA Medical Center in Los Angeles. He died on the 29th of November 2001 at ex-bandmate McCartney's house in LA, aged 58, with his wife and son at his side. The concert for George was held at the Royal Albert Hall in London on the 29th of November 2002 as a memorial to George Harrison on the first anniversary of his death. The event was organized by Harrison's widow Olivia and his son Danny, and arranged under the musical direction of Eric Clapton. The profits from the event went to the Material World Charitable Foundation, an organization founded by Harrison. Hi, sorry to interrupt the video. Just a very quick, very important announcement. I published a book. That's right, I published a book. It's called From the Cavern to Abbey Road, a journey through the Beatles' iconic landmarks. In this book, we see the story of the Beatles from the places where everything happened. Some of them are famous, like let's say Abbey Road Studios, and some of them perhaps not so famous, like for example the art gallery where John and Yoko met. I put a lot of work and effort into this book, and it would help me so much if you grabbed a copy. It's available on Amazon all around the world, so if you want your copy, please go to the link in the description. Thank you, now back to the video. After the Beatles broke up in 1970, Ringo Starr embarked on a solo career and faced various personal and professional ups and downs. In the immediate aftermath of the Beatles' breakup, Ringo released his first solo album, Sentimental Journey, in 1970, which consisted of pre-rock standards. Later in that year, he released a country album, Beer Cups of Blues. These initial albums showed Ringo's versatility and willingness to explore different musical genres. Ringo married Maureen Cox in 1965, and they had 3 children together: Zach, born in 1965, Jason, born in 1967, and Lee, born in 1970. They initially lived in Weybridge, Surrey, very close to the houses of John Lennon and George Harrison. After John Lennon and Yoko Ono moved to America permanently, John sold his house, Tittenhurst Park, to Ringo, where he moved with his family. In 1971, Ringo had a hit with the single I Don't Come Easy, top 10 in both the UK and US. His next few singles, including Back Off Bagaloo in 1972, were also successful. Ringo's third solo album, called Ringo, released in 1973, was a major success, featuring hits like Photograph and You're 16. The album included contributions from all his former Beatle bandmates. However, his success began to fade with subsequent albums. Goodnight Vienna was relatively successful, but later efforts like Ringo IV failed to achieve the same level of commercial success. During this period, Ringo also faced personal challenges, including issues with alcohol and drugs. Ringo and Maureen divorced in 1975. In 1980, he met the actress Barbara Bach on the set of the film Caveman. They married in 1981, and their relationship marked a turning point in Ringo's personal life. They lived primarily in the UK, but also spent time in Monte Carlo and Los Angeles. Ringo continued to release music throughout the 1980s, but with limited success. Albums like Stop and Smell the Roses, 1981, and Old Wave, 1983, did not perform well commercially. During this time, Ringo's struggles with alcohol intensified, impacting both his personal life and his career. By the late 1980s, Ringo sought help for his addiction issues. and he and Barbara both went to rehab in 1988. This marked a significant turning point, as Ringo emerged from rehab committed to sobriety and ready to revive his career. In 1989, Ringo formed the All-Star Band, a supergroup featuring rotating members from famous bands. The concept was simple. Each member performed some of their own hits with Ringo leading the show. The All-Star Band tours were highly successful and helped re-establish Ringo as a prominent figure in the music industry. The tours continued throughout the 1990s and beyond, with various lineups over the years. Ringo released several solo albums in the 1990s and 2000s, including Time Takes Time, 1992, and Vertical Man, 1998. He also published his first book, Postcards from the Boys, in 2003, featuring reproductions of postcards sent to him by the other Beatles. In 2008, Ringo and Barbara moved to Los Angeles. He continued to tour with the All-Star Band and released albums like Why Not, 2010, Ringo, 2012, and Give More Love, 2017. Ringo also became a prominent advocate for peace and love, often using his platform to promote these messages. Ringo was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a solo artist in 2015, an honor that recognized his contributions to the music world, both with the Beatles and as a solo artist. As of 2024, Ringo Starr continues to tour and release music, maintaining an active presence in the music industry. His enduring legacy continues to inspire fans around the world. After the Beatles broke up in 1970, Paul McCartney faced a difficult time. He fell into a depression, but his wife Linda helped him recover. She praised his songwriting and encouraged him to continue making music. In her honor, he wrote Maybe I'm Amazed, and also said every love song he writes is for Linda. In 1969, Paul started his publishing company, MPL Communications, McCartney Productions Limited, following the advice of his father-in-law, Lee Eastman, to invest in music publishing. His first solo album, titled McCartney, was released in 1970, and it was a success, reaching number 1 in the US. Apart from some vocal contributions from Linda, Paul recorded everything on the album himself. In 1971, Paul and Linda released a second album called Ram, which included the hit single Uncle Albert. That same year, Paul formed the band Wings. He knew it would be tough to follow the Beatles' success, but chose to continue because of his love for music. In September, the McCartney's daughter Stella was born. Wings' first tour in 1972 was a modest affair, performing at universities across the UK. They avoided Beatles songs, and by the end of the tour, Paul felt more confident. In 1973, Wings had their first US number 1 single with My Love, and released Red Rose Speedway, another successful album. They also created the theme song Live and Let Die for the James Bond film. After some lineup changes, Wings released Band on the Run, one of the best-selling albums of the decade. They followed up with Venus and Mars and Wings at the Speed of Sound, both chart-topping albums. The 1975-1976 Wings Over the World tour was a massive success, and for the first time Paul performed Beatles songs live with Wings. In 1977, James McCartney was born to Paul and Linda. Also that year, Wings' single "My Love Can't Tire" became one of the UK's best-selling singles in history. Despite the commercial success of albums like London Town and Back to the Egg, critical reception was mixed. In 1980, Paul released his second solo album titled McCartney 2, which, as well as McCartney 1, he recorded all by himself. That year, he was arrested for marijuana possession in Tokyo and spent 9 days in jail. By 1981, Paul felt Wings had run its course and disbanded the group. In the 1980s, Paul collaborated with Stevie Wonder on Ebony and Ivory and Michael Jackson on The Girl Is Mine and Say Say Say. He also starred in the film Give My Regards to Broad Street in 1984, which received bad reviews at the time, although the soundtrack did well, especially the song No More Lonely Nights with David Gilmour on lead guitar. Paul wrote and recorded a song for the film Spies Like Us in 1985 and participated in Live Aid. The Paul McCartney World Tour in 1989 marked his return to large-scale touring. In 1991, he ventured into orchestral music with the Liverpool Oratorio. Sadly, on the 17th of April 1999, Paul's wife, Linda, passed away from breast cancer. Paul continued his musical career releasing Driving Rain in 2001 and touring with a new band in 2002. That year, he married Heather Mills, and in 2003 they had a daughter called Beatrice. Paul performed at various high-profile events, including the Super Bowl and Live Aid. In 2008, after a messy divorce with Heather Mills, Paul married Nancy Shevell in 2011 at the Old Marylebone Town Hall, the same place where he married Linda. He performed at the Queen's Diamond Jubilee concert at Buckingham Palace and the 2012 Summer Olympics. In January 2017, McCartney filed a lawsuit in the United States District Court against Sony ATV Music Publishing, seeking to reclaim ownership of his share of the Lennon-McCartney song catalog. McCartney and Sony agreed to a confidential settlement in June 2017. In 2021, he released a book called The Lyrics 1956 to the Present. And in 2023, he published 1964 Eye of the Storm, a collection of photos he took during Beatlemania. The photos were also exhibited at the National Portrait Gallery in London. As of 2024, Paul McCartney continues to release music and perform worldwide, maintaining his status as one of the most enduring figures in music history. In the early 90s, Paul, George and Ringo took a break from their solo careers to work on something truly special. The Beatles Anthology is a comprehensive multimedia project that delves into the history and the legacy of the Beatles. It encompasses a documentary series, a book, and 3 double albums that feature rare and unreleased recordings. The project was a significant undertaking that brought together surviving Beatles members, Paul McCartney, George Harrison and Ringo Starr, with a special contribution from the late John Lennon. The idea of the Beatles Anthology began to take shape in the early 1990s. The project was conceived as a way to tell the definitive story of the Beatles directly from the members themselves. The documentary series, produced by Apple Corps, was directed by Jeff Wonfor and edited by Andy Matthews. It consisted of 8 episodes that chronicled the band's career from their early days in Liverpool to their breakup in 1970. The series first aired in November 1995. The anthology documentary featured interviews with Paul, George and Ringo, along with archival footage of John. It provided a deep look at their rise to fame, their innovative music, and the challenges they faced. The series included rare footage, home movies, and behind-the-scenes clips, offering fans an intimate glimpse into the Beatles' lives. The book, released in the year 2000, compiled interviews, photographs, and memorabilia from the band members' personal archives. It complemented the documentary by providing additional insights and stories that didn't make it into the film. The heart of the anthology project was the 3 double albums, released in 1995 and 1996. These albums feature a treasure trove of rare and unreleased recordings, including early demos, outtakes, and alternative versions of well-known songs. Each album provided a deeper understanding of the Beatles' creative process and evolution as musicians. One of the most exciting aspects of the Beatles Anthology was the inclusion of new Beatles songs, created from old demos recorded by John Lennon in the late 1970s. After John's tragic death in 1980, Yoko Ono gave to Paul, George and Ringo a set of unfinished Lennon demos. The surviving Beatles worked together to complete these tracks, marking the first time they had recorded together since the band's breakup. These songs were Real Love and Free as a Bird. A third Lennon demo, Now and Then, was also considered for the project. Although the Beatles worked on the track during the anthology sessions, it was ultimately left unfinished at the time. The song was finally released in 2023. The Beatles Anthology was more than just a retrospective, it was a celebration of the band's enduring influence and a testament to their musical innovation. Today, more than 50 years after the breakup of the Beatles in 1970, the legacy of John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison and Ringo Starr lives on. And their music and timeless appeal will continue to influence artists for generations to come. So there you go, that's exactly what the Beatles got up to after the breakup of the Beatles. So, when it comes to the post-Beatles years, who do you think was the most prolific artist? So, this is pretty much it for now. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. You can also follow me on Instagram or Facebook. There is a PayPal link for donations. Of course, every donation will be absolutely appreciated. You can buy my book on Amazon. Actually, that would make me very happy indeed. The link is in the description. Or the free option is just to subscribe to this YouTube channel and maybe click the bell icon so you're the first to know when I upload new videos. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Bye.
Well, I'm afraid that's us run out of time.
Oh,
I'm really
okay.
sorry.
Oh,
So,
bye, everyone.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
If I give my heart to you, I must be sure from the very start that